Two advisors to former President Trump are one step closer to being held in contempt of Congress. The House Rules Committee yesterday advanced the contempt resolution for Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino. Both have refused to cooperate with the Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack, claiming executive privilege. The leaders of the Select Committee laid out why testimony from those two men matters in their investigation.
Mr. Scavino worked directly with President Trump to spread President Trump's false message that the election was stolen and to recruit Americans to come to Washington with the false premise that January 6th would be an opportunity to, quote, take back their country. Mr. Navarro will also be a key witness. He has written a book boasting about his role in planning and coordinating the activity of January 6th. And yet, as the chairman noted, he does not have the courage to testify here.
To put it plainly, they were both involved in efforts to challenge or overturn the election. Last I checked, a president's attempt to stay in power after the people voted him out of office aren't the sort of things where executive privilege applies.
Remember, Peter Navarro is the man who laid out in his book and in media interviews after the Green Bay sweep plan to steal the election, says the only reason it didn't work is because Vice President Pence didn't carry the ball across the goal line. The full House is expected to vote on the contempt resolution sometime this week.
New Hampshire Governor S.ununu is walking back comments he made over the weekend at the Gridiron Club dinner in Washington, D.C., an event noted for its tradition of roasting politicians with satirical and often cutting comedy speeches. According to Politico, S.ununu said, quote, "The press often will ask me if I think Donald Trump is crazy, and I'll say it this way. I don't think he's so crazy that you could put him in a mental institution, but I think if he were in one, he ain't getting out." However, during an appearance on MSNBC's Meet the Press Daily yesterday, the Republican governor said calling the former president, quote, "effing crazy" was all part of a joke.
President Trump has been there, so he knows what it's all about. And it's really a reminder that it's not there to laugh at one another. We laugh with one another. I mean, right before I got up and did my whole spiel, they did a whole skit making fun of me. And it was funny. It was funny. So look, these are all jokes, and it's kind of a way to kind of bring some bipartisanship and some smiles back to Washington.
It's just not true. 99% of all jokes are
yeah,
true,
people who were there in the room that night suggest that S.ununu was saying what he wanted to say there. And certainly he is someone who Mitch McConnell had really hoped would run for Senate from New Hampshire, increasing their chances of getting a majority, and he's not doing that either. I suspect we'll hear from the former president any second.
Well, not really, because he's really not on any major platform.
Well, he's got that email thing. But
he'll do his little thing wherever it is.
S.ununu claims just a joke among friends. I'm not sure Donald Trump sees it that way.
Yeah, no, he's not known for laughing at himself.
Self-deprecation.
No, he doesn't know how.
Stronger suits. Former President Barack Obama is returning to the White House today for the first time since he left office. He'll be there promoting the Affordable Care Act alongside President Joe Biden. According to senior administration officials, the Treasury is expected to announce a new proposal at the event that will grant financial support under the ACA to families that pay more than 10% of their income toward health care coverage. The proposal would take effect next year. Administration officials did not say how it would be paid for. The event marks Biden and Obama's first joint appearance since last fall. And finally,
moving forward with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court in a 53-47 vote, the full Senate voted to discharge her nomination out of the Judiciary Committee. At least 3 Republican senators have now publicly stated they will vote in favor of her final confirmation. That includes Senator Mitt Romney, who voted against Judge Jackson when she was confirmed to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and Senator Lisa Murkowski, who admitted her decision could hurt her politically.
Everybody else is thinking about is, how does this play? How does this play? In fairness, I have assumed a level of risk in doing this because it is a position that that my conference has not taken. But you take that risk, and that's just the way it is.
You know, it's a shame that's the way it is. It used to be that Supreme Court justices would get 90 votes. Ruth Bader Ginsburg got 90, 91, 92, 93. I remember back when Barack Obama was running for president, wanted to support John Roberts, and David Axelrod said, you can't do it. If you vote for John Roberts, then everything he does on the court will follow you around to the campaign trail. And that's just sort of, unfortunately, where things have gone for some time, which you would hope that we could someday get back to the point where if somebody's elected president, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, you know what? Let them have their say. If somebody's wildly out of the mainstream or unqualified, fine, have discussions on that. But these justices should be getting 80, 90 votes. And you shouldn't go up there and have people trying to destroy people the way they seem to do every single time.
Well, Judge Jackson's nomination was deadlocked when every Republican in the committee voted against her earlier in the day.
I'll vote no. I'm the first time I've ever voted against any Supreme Court nominee. After 4 days of hearings, I now know why the left likes her so much.
If Judge Jackson is confirmed, I believe she will prove to be the most extreme and the furthest left justice ever to serve on the United States Supreme Court.
Judge Jackson is beholden to the radical left that is teaching our children that they can choose their own sex.
Let me just say for the record, sex crimes against children are not fiction.
Judge Jackson will coddle criminals and terrorists.
My Lord.
Sweet Jesus.
I mean, come on.
Sweet Jesus, deliver us from this idiocy.
Okay, Democrats on the committee defended Judge Jackson against the Republican attacks.
How? How qualified do you have to be, double Harvard? How qualified do you have to be clerking at all levels of the federal judiciary?
They even suggested that Judge Jackson, a mother to 2 wonderful daughters, quote, endangers children. Judge Jackson is a better person than me.
I know that's going to fall on deaf ears with some members of this committee. Members who unfortunately cared more about seeing their sound bites on social media.
Exactly, and so they can set themselves up to try to run for president. A final full Senate vote is likely to be held this Friday. Let's bring in right now MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman. Charles, why don't we, if we have to focus on one Republican, why don't we focus on Lindsey? Because Lindsey voted for her, like, what, a year ago? 10 months ago. 10 months ago. Suddenly.
What happened?
Suddenly. She is just too radical. Right. How do you vote for somebody 10 months ago to take one of the most important positions in the federal judiciary?
Well,
and
Joe,
then
it's
10 months later,
something must
this
have
nonsense.
And something must have
she got
happened.
really radical in 10 months.
You know, this is such an indicative space around where we are with respect to our current conversation around politics and where they have no place. And as you already talked about, there has been a history where Supreme Court appointees have gotten as many as 90 votes, 90 plus votes. And in this case, there's no reason that this woman, this incredibly brilliant and qualified judge, should not be receiving a much, much larger amount of support from all of U.S. senators. And when it comes to Lindsey Graham, there can be very little argument that he probably demonstrates the most hypocritic and just great level of ridiculous contradiction in the fact that just a year ago, this was an incredibly qualified judge in order to ascend to the federal circuit. And now all of a sudden you're worried about an activist judge. This is nothing but political grandstanding, and everyone seems to know it, but it seems like everyone is simply okay with it.
It's gotten so harsh, and you know, we were a lot of our viewers didn't like it at the time, but when Brett Kavanaugh was up and suddenly we were talking about rape rooms in Washington D.C. high school parties. I mean, you grew up in the suburbs of Washington D.C. Were there rape rooms? Like, you know, Michael Avenatti goes, no, but if a girl was kissed by somebody else, would come home and laugh at. No, we need to bring this up. And then there were stories in the New Yorker saying, oh, somebody may remember, did he kiss me or not? Or did he reach out? Like, this madness on both sides. And Republicans, Willie, said, oh, because Brett Kavanaugh was treated so badly, we're going to show more grace. And oh, so you suggest that she coddles pedophiles? Is that the way the Republican Party restrains himself? By accusing her of being a friend of pedophiles, and other Republicans accusing anybody who supports her nomination as being pro-pedophilia. Does it really sound like Republicans really have distinguished themselves much from Michael Avenatti and the people that created the circus around Brett Kavanaugh?
And let's be clear, that is the accusation. We heard it right there from Josh Hawley, that this future Supreme Court justice protects and coddles pedophiles. That is the accusation. And as you said, there are other Republicans whose names we won't use to dignify what they've said over the last couple of days, who said the 3 Republicans who say they will vote for Judge Jackson are pro-pedophilia. That's just saying out loud. That's a member of Congress saying that. Here's more of Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday in his about face. Again, remember, less than 10 months ago, he voted yay for this judge.
Now, all of us are in politics over here. Again, I'm inclined to vote for judges of the other side. But this choice of Judge Jackson was really embraced by the most radical people in the Democratic movement. If we get back the Senate and we're in charge of this body, and there's judicial openings, we will talk to our colleagues on the other side. But if we're in charge, she would not have been before this committee. You would have had somebody more moderate than this.
Quiet part out loud and all the rest of that, basically saying if we were in charge, she wouldn't even have gotten a hearing the way Merrick Garland did.
Right, taking us to a real dangerous new place is what that threat is. So first of all, there are 3 Republicans, Murkowski, Romney, Collins, who have supported this justice. The White House is very pleased. They, of course, wanted this to be able to say this had bipartisan support. Certainly 53 votes, a lot smaller than the margins we used to get, but still they're happy about that. But this from Lindsey Graham yesterday is sort of stunning, to suggest that if the other party that controls the Senate, contrary to the party that holds the White House, that's president, may never get a Supreme Court justice. That they wouldn't even bring them to a vote for a committee hearing. And that's what we saw in 2016 with Merrick Garland, McConnell using the excuse that year that it was an election year, which of course did not have precedent before. But Graham's not even going that far. He's just simply saying if Republicans were in charge, we wouldn't even bring her to a vote. And he had favored a judge from his home state of South Carolina. Maybe that's why he's particularly been out of shape here. But really, he seems to be setting a marker for a very dangerous gridlock going forward.
Coming up, what's driving the day on Wall Street? CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin breaks down the morning's business headline. Now to some other stories making headlines this morning. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is inviting Florida's LGBTQ community to move to New York after the passage of a controversial law. During a news conference yesterday, Mayor Adams announced the launch of a new ad campaign targeting Florida's new law, dubbed the Don't Say Gay law by critics. It prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in lower grade levels or in a specified manner in the state's public schools, specifically kindergarten through 3rd grade. The ad campaign began yesterday and will run through May 29th. The mayor's office says it will include rainbow-studded digital billboards and a social media push targeting 5 cities in Florida. The new billboard campaign is projected to draw 5 million views and is being funded by company donations.
A new ruling from the Supreme Court will make it easier for people to sue police and the government for malicious prosecution. In a 6-3 ruling, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion, writing the defendant only needs to prove their case did not end in a conviction. The ruling was a victory for a Brooklyn man who was arrested in 2014 after a relative made a false accusation of child sexual abuse. Larry Thompson refused to let police in his house without a warrant and was charged with resisting arrest after a scuffle with officers. He was held in jail for 2 days before charges were dropped without explanation from the prosecutor or the judge.
The Senate has reached a deal on a $10 billion COVID relief package. package. The money will fund vaccines, tests, and therapeutic drug treatment. The package does not include international aid after senators could not agree on the price tag. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki released a statement noting the new deal is far less than half the $22.5 billion the administration proposed. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says a second funding bill is expected later this spring.
And finally, a story I believe submitted to us by Donnie Deutsch. A lawyer in Florida filed a federal class action lawsuit accusing Burger King of false advertising, essentially claiming BK Whoppers are too small.
What?
The suit alleges Burger King began inflating the size of its burgers and images back in 2017. Before that, the suit claims the fast food chain more fairly advertised its food products. Burger King and its parent company did not respond to NBC's request for comment. Remember yesterday, Donnie brought us the story of the Pop-Tart, right? The lawsuit that they weren't fruity enough. I don't know whether it was something like that. But if you've got the time in your day to sue Burger King over the size of a Whopper, it's probably time to get outdoors a little bit, maybe look up some old friends.
Try some other food sources, like something
of
more
course,
healthy.
And Donnie did in his new, the brand up, brand down segment, which is a new, actually it was new and Remedy DeLorean in 83, 84, and it was brand down and Braniff Airlines. Braniff Airlines up seriously through 2007. He was stubborn on that. Let me ask you something serious here. Front page of the Daily News. So Eric Adams really taking this crime fight to other people in this city, and explain to me if you guys can, as a New Yorker, Jonathan Lemire, Eric Adams wants to clean New York City up. Wants to clean up from all the crime. Apparently, though, it says here, Adams, holding sneakers of slain 12-year-old Brooklyn boy, says, "Stop telling me to slow down on the crime fight." Talk about the battle in New York, just for people that aren't from the area and want to know what's going on.
Crime, including violent crime in New York City, like big cities across the country, is up. It's gone up significantly in the last year and a half or so. And there's been a wave of shootings recently, and a couple of really tragic ones with very young victims, including this 12-year-old. So the mayor has received some pushback by reinstalling some police units that had been disbanded in recent years. And he is saying, look, we need this right now. This is, even though we've had talked to Reverend Sharpton about this, there's some concern in the community about some of the tactics these police officers are using, but the sense is right now they are needed, and Adams says that they will follow procedure as they go. And of course, we know we've had discussions here about bail reform and people being put back on the streets too soon, and that's to the frustration of law enforcement as well. But this is a real thing. Adams has only been in office now a couple of months, and between the homelessness surging, obviously real cases of mental illness surging on the streets, and now violent crime, he has his hands full. When I was living here all the time, took the subway all the time, I wouldn't think about doing it now, just from what I hear about the subway system at certain times, Willie. It's just, you're going back, I wouldn't say you're going back to the late 70s where it was horrific, but you certainly are back in the 80s. It's not like it's been over the past 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, certain times of day or night for sure, but I mean, I still take it a lot, but there is a sense in the city, based on the crime we've seen, that you're looking over your shoulder, and there's no question about that, especially on the subways. But Eric Adams was elected mayor based on a platform of public safety. For everything else going on in the city right now, that was the #1 issue for voters. A former 24-year New York City cop who said, I can strike the balance of getting crime down and also keeping our police in check and reforming police behavior that in certain cases has been bad and not up to the standards of the NYPD. And he's doing that. He's making that. But still, the crime persists, and he's taking moments like the tragic death of this 12-year-old killed in a drive-by intended for someone else to make the point that we have work to do, and that this is why he brought that anti-gun unit back.
Is he gonna be able to do this, Mike? You talked to Commissioner Bratton, who's obviously concerned about so many things, and I think he probably agrees with the mayor on just about everything he's doing. But is he going to be able to get past some of the political obstacles here to make New York a safer place? Again, not for the Upper East Side, but for the people who are most affected. By the way, let's say it again. You can't say it enough. This is a mayor who won the Democratic primary in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Queens, even in Staten Island, and that was for a reason, because of crime.
Well, you just put your finger on actually the future, the successful future or the failure of the future in terms of trying to get guns off the street, and it is that you have political opposition to it. You have AOC in opposition to the new gun squad, for lack of a better phrase, except I'm told, and I really believe this based on my own past experience in other cities, that if you walk the neighborhoods most afflicted, most affected by guns, by gun violence, the people there want more police on the street, want more police to show up. They want to see police on the subways to that point. And this is a notion of handgun weapons, this city, as so many large American cities are. And the effort to get guns off the street, I mean, the way the kids use it, the kids, 15, 16 years old, they can rent a gun from someone who has a gun. I need the gun. I'll pay you $25 to use the gun for an hour and a half. They take the gun out, they settle their scores, whatever. 12-year-old kid gets killed and the gun goes back into use. And that's got to stop. And it's an almost impossible task, but Eric Adams has taken it on, and good for him.
Last night, a candlelight vigil was held at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. to commemorate the 54th anniversary of Reverend King's assassination. Among the many people at last night's ceremony was Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. The ambassador said she was touched by the solidarity with Ukraine as we fight for the same values and freedom. Joining us now, civil rights leaders Martin Luther King III and Andrea King. Andrea, tell us about the event and also the symbolism of having the Ukrainian ambassador attending.
Well, good morning. We really felt that as the nation and the world observed the 54th anniversary since the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, it was very important to really take a moment to reflect on where we are as a world and nation, and to really remember that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the eradication of the triple evils of poverty, of racism, and war, and that he stood for peace, justice, and equity. And so we felt it was very important to have a moment to reflect on that and to stand with the Ukrainian people, with the Ukrainian ambassador, and call for peace, to remember that he was taken from us in violence, and to bring back the notion of peace and to talk about nonviolence in this world.
Martin Luther King III, Andrea said it was important to take a look at where we are in this fight. Where are we?
You know, sometimes when it looks very dark, which it does at this particular moment, and Andrea often says this, we look to the stars at the darkest moment. And when we look at what's happening domestically with violence increasing, when we look at what's happening really all over the world, and the many wars that exist, but certainly Ukraine being the most important because it could propel us into a World War III that no one wants to see. But the fact of the matter is, we also know that none of us will ever give up. None of us will give in. We can't give out. We have always endured as a nation and as a world community, and at some point, humankind, Dad would say, must learn nonviolence, or we might face non-existence. I want to believe that we are a much better humanity than we are seeing right now. We're seeing the inhumanity which is happening in the Ukraine. Russians bombing hospitals with children and places where people are supposed to be safe. It's really unconscionable that we would see this behavior at this particular time. We as a global society should be much further ahead, and we have to continue to work to set that tone. And so although it looks extraordinarily difficult, I still remain hopeful.
Andrea, good morning. It's good to see you. We were talking yesterday on the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination with Reverend Sharpton about this moment in the Supreme Court, where it looks now, with the support of 3 Republicans like Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, will become the first black woman ever to serve on the Supreme Court. And I'm curious what you think that means for the continuation of Dr. King's dream.
Well, I think first and foremost, it was extraordinary that happened yesterday. So I think in some divine way, it was a sign for us to keep going, to acknowledge the fact of how far we have to go, but how far we've come. And certainly as a black woman, as a black mother, I cannot think of anyone that's more qualified to sit on the Supreme Court. But moreover, I think about all of the black women that are sitting in places where, under tremendous amount of stress and strain, they're continuing forward with grace, with dignity, with power, and that they are actually being seen. We're certainly not being seen enough, and all too often we're still being diminished, or the magic in little black girls are being ignored. But yesterday certainly was a sign, and particularly to girls, little girls and black girls, about the power of and intelligence and diligence and grace and strength of black women.
Mr. King, your father's signature, it ranks among very few in terms of lasting prominence, memory, and significance. Only a handful of Americans carry that significance. Your name, Martin Luther King III, I'm going to assume has been both a blessing and a burden somewhat to you. What's it been like to carry that name, to carry that legacy, and keep moving it forward as you have done?
Well, it is an extraordinary honor. I'm thankful, though, that my mother prepared me when I was a young man, or actually a young boy, by saying, you don't have to go to Morehouse College like your father did. You don't have to become a civil rights leader. You don't have to become a minister. Be your best self, whatever that is, and we will support you. So that kind of liberated me, because if I woke up every day trying to fulfill the shoes of Martin Luther King Jr., I would fail miserably. I'm not sure Martin Luther King Jr., based on the iconic scenario that exists, could fulfill his shoes at this time. But the fact of the matter is, it is an extraordinary honor and a blessing. And I always look at it that way, as opposed to the burdens. Everyone has burdens, quite frankly. And so I want to always be positive and thankful and grateful. And I also believe that to him or her that much is given, of him or her is much required.